The humid summer air hung heavy over the streets of Chicago's South Side in 1975. Muhammad Ali had just finished his afternoon training session at the gym on 63rd Street, his body glistening with sweat as he stepped out into the blazing sun. The heavyweight champion of the world walked with that familiar confident stride, his head held high, acknowledging the waves and cheers from passers-by who recognized the most famous face in boxing. As Ali made his way down the bustling sidewalk, the sounds of the city filled his ears, car horns honking, children playing in the distance, and the rhythmic beat of music spilling from open shop doors. But something else caught his attention. A voice, loud and commanding, echoing from the direction of the small community center just ahead. "Brothers and sisters, gather around. The mosque needs your help. Allah sees your generosity." Ali slowed his pace, his brow furrowing slightly. He knew every legitimate religious leader in this neighborhood, and this voice was unfamiliar. Curiosity piqued. He moved closer to the growing crowd that had formed around a man dressed in traditional Islamic robes, complete with a white turban and a long flowing beard. The man stood on a makeshift platform constructed from wooden crates, his arms raised dramatically as he addressed the gathering crowd. "My dear Muslim brothers and sisters, I come to you today with urgent news from our mosque. We are in desperate need of funds to continue our holy work. The roof leaks, the children have no proper place to study the Quran, and our elderly cannot pray in comfort." Ali positioned himself at the edge of the crowd, his trained eyes studying the scene carefully. Something felt off. The man's accent seemed forced. His Arabic pronunciation was clumsy, and his knowledge of Islamic teachings appeared superficial at best. But what troubled Ali most was the way this supposed imam was pressuring people for money. "Sister, your $5 will be blessed by Allah," the fake imam said to an elderly woman who was digging through her worn purse. "Brother, surely you can spare $10 for the house of God." He pressed a young man who looked like he was struggling financially. The crowd was growing larger, and Ali noticed how many of his neighbors were reaching into their pockets and purses, their faces filled with genuine concern for what they believed was a legitimate religious cause. These were hard-working people, many of whom didn't have much to spare, but their faith compelled them to give. Ali's jaw tightened as he watched the deception unfold. He had seen enough. The champion knew he had to act, but he also understood the delicate nature of the situation. He couldn't simply charge forward and create chaos. This required a more strategic approach, moving through the crowd with the grace of a boxer navigating the ring. Ali made his way closer to the front. His presence didn't go unnoticed. Whispers began to ripple through the gathering as people recognized him. "That's Muhammad Ali," someone whispered. "The champ is here." The fake imam, noticing the commotion, looked up and saw the towering figure of the heavyweight champion approaching. For a moment, his confident demeanor faltered, but he quickly recovered, perhaps thinking that having a celebrity in the crowd would only help his cause. "Ah, my brother Muhammad Ali," the impostor called out with exaggerated enthusiasm. "What an honor to have the great champion here with us today. Surely you, as a devoted Muslim, understand the importance of supporting our mosque." Ali stopped directly in front of the platform, his dark eyes fixed intently on the man above him. The crowd fell silent, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The tension in the air was palpable as the two men faced each other. "Brother," Ali said, his voice calm but carrying an unmistakable authority, "I'd like to ask you a few questions about your mosque." The fake imam's smile widened, but Ali could see the nervousness behind his eyes. "Of course, my brother. Ask anything you wish." Ali's voice grew louder, ensuring everyone in the crowd could hear him clearly. "Which mosque do you represent? I know every imam in Chicago, and I don't recognize you." The impostor's confidence began to crack. I represent the new mosque on the west side. Perhaps you haven't heard of it yet." "The west side?" Ali repeated, his tone becoming more pointed. "What's the name of this mosque? What street is it on?" The crowd began to murmur as they sensed the interrogation taking a serious turn. The fake imam shifted uncomfortably on his platform, his eyes darting around as if looking for an escape route. It's the Masjid al-Nur," he stammered. On Western Avenue." Ali shook his head slowly. "Brother, there is no Masjid al-Nur on Western Avenue. I've been to every mosque in this city." His voice rose, carrying the power and conviction that had made him famous both in and out of the ring. "And I've never seen you at any of them." The crowd's murmur grew louder, and Ali could see the realization dawning on their faces. The elderly woman, who had been reaching for her purse, stopped mid-motion, her hand frozen in place. "Furthermore," Ali continued, his voice now booming across the gathering, "a real imam would never pressure people for money on the street like this. Our faith teaches us that charity should come from the heart, not from manipulation and lies." The fake imam's face had gone pale beneath his artificial beard. He began to stammer, "Brother, you misunderstand. I am simply trying to help our community." "No," Ali said firmly, stepping closer to the platform. "You're trying to steal from our community. You're taking advantage of good people's faith and generosity." The crowd was now fully engaged, their attention completely focused on the confrontation unfolding before them. Some people began to step back, creating more space around the platform, while others moved closer, wanting to hear every word. Ali's voice carried the same intensity he brought to his pre-fight speeches. "You see, my brothers and sisters, this man is not who he claims to be. He's wearing the clothes of a religious leader, but his heart is that of a thief. He's counting on our respect for Islam to blind us to his deception." The impostor made a desperate attempt to regain control. "How dare you question my faith? I am a servant of Allah." "Then prove it," Ali challenged, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. "Recite Surah Al-Fatiha in Arabic. Every Muslim knows this prayer by heart." The fake imam's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The crowd waited in tense silence as seconds ticked by without a response. Finally, the man attempted to mumble something that sounded vaguely Arabic, but it was clear to everyone present that he had no idea what he was saying. Ali shook his head in disgust. That wasn't even close to Arabic, let alone a Quranic verse. He turned to address the crowd directly. "This man is a fraud. He's preying on your kindness and your faith to line his own pockets." The atmosphere in the crowd shifted dramatically. What had started as a charitable gathering was now transforming into something entirely different. People who had been ready to donate money were now looking at the fake imam with suspicion and anger. "Give us back our money!" shouted the young man, who had already handed over $10. "You should be ashamed of yourself," called out the elderly woman, her voice shaking with indignation. The fake imam realized his scheme had completely unraveled. He began gathering up the money he had already collected, stuffing bills into his pockets as quickly as possible. I need to go. There's been a misunderstanding." But Ali wasn't finished. "Oh no, brother. You're not going anywhere just yet." He turned to the crowd again. "Everyone who gave this man money, step forward. You're getting it back." The impostor's eyes widened in panic as he saw several people moving toward the platform. He clutched the money tighter to his chest. "This is mine. These were donations." "Donations given under false pretenses are theft," Ali declared. "And in this neighborhood, we don't tolerate thieves." The fake imam made a sudden move to jump down from the platform and run, but Ali was ready for him. With the reflexes that had made him the heavyweight champion of the world, Ali stepped forward and blocked his path. The man found himself face to face with 6 feet 3 inches of pure determination. "You have 2 choices," Ali said, his voice low but menacing. You can return every penny you've stolen from these good people, or I can call the police and let them sort this out. What's it going to be?" The crowd had now completely surrounded the platform, and the fake imam realized he was trapped. His elaborate scheme had crumbled in a matter of minutes, all because he had the misfortune of trying to run his con in the presence of Muhammad Ali. With shaking hands, the impostor began pulling money from his pockets and his collection box. "Here," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Take it all back." Ali supervised as each person who had donated came forward to reclaim their money. The elderly woman got her $5 back, the young man retrieved his 10, and several others recovered smaller amounts they had contributed. As the last person collected their money, Ali addressed the fake imam one final time. "Now I want you to remove those robes. You don't deserve to wear them." The man hesitated for a moment, but the look in Ali's eyes made it clear this wasn't a request. Slowly, he began to remove the turban and the flowing robes, revealing ordinary street clothes underneath. Without the costume, he looked like exactly what he was, a common criminal who had tried to exploit people's religious beliefs for personal gain. "Get out of this neighborhood," Ali commanded. "And if I ever see you around here again, trying to take advantage of good people, you'll have me to answer to." The now exposed con artist nodded frantically and began pushing through the crowd, desperate to escape. As he disappeared around the corner, the gathered people erupted in cheers and applause for Muhammad Ali, but Ali raised his hand for silence. "Brothers and sisters, this is an important lesson for all of us. Our faith teaches us to be generous and to help those in need, but it also teaches us to be wise. We must always verify that our charity is going to legitimate causes." An older man in the crowd called out, "How did you know he was fake, champ?" Ali smiled, his anger now replaced by his characteristic warmth. Several things gave him away. First, his Arabic was terrible. Any real imam would speak Arabic fluently. Second, he didn't know basic Islamic teachings. And third, legitimate religious leaders don't pressure people for money on street corners. They work through established mosques and community organizations. A young woman raised her hand. "What should we do if we want to help our local mosque?" "Great question, sister," Ali replied. "Visit the mosque directly. Meet the real imam. See how your donations will be used. True Islamic charity is transparent and comes from the heart, not from fear or pressure." The crowd began to disperse, but many people lingered to thank Ali personally for exposing the fraud. As the champion shook hands and exchanged words with his neighbors, he reflected on what had just happened. This incident reminded him why he had converted to Islam in the first place. Not just for the spiritual guidance it provided, but for the sense of community and mutual protection it fostered. When someone tried to exploit that community, it was every Muslim's duty to stand up and defend it. As Ali finally continued his walk home, he thought about the broader implications of what had occurred. This fake imam was probably not working alone. There were likely others out there, targeting different neighborhoods, taking advantage of people's faith and generosity. Something needed to be done to protect vulnerable communities from these predators. The next morning, Ali woke up with a plan forming in his mind. He couldn't be everywhere at once, but he could use his fame and influence to educate people about these scams. He decided to reach out to local newspapers and radio stations to share the story of what had happened the previous day. Within hours, Ali was sitting in the studios of WVON, Chicago's premier African-American radio station, telling the story to thousands of listeners across the city. The host, a longtime friend of Ali's, was fascinated by the tale. "So you just walked up to this guy and exposed him right there on the spot?" the radio host asked. "That's right," Ali confirmed. "But the real heroes were the people in the crowd. Once they understood what was happening, they stood up for themselves and their community. I just helped them see the truth." The interview sparked a citywide conversation about religious fraud and how to protect against it. Other community leaders began sharing their own experiences with similar scams, and law enforcement agencies started taking notice. Detective Robert Martinez of the Chicago Police Department's Fraud Division had been tracking reports of fake religious solicitations for months. When he heard Ali's radio interview, he immediately reached out to the champion. "Mr. Ali, we've been investigating these types of scams for a while now," Detective Martinez explained during their phone conversation. "Your description of this man matches someone we've been looking for. Would you be willing to work with us to help identify him?" Ali didn't hesitate. "Absolutely, Detective. These people are hurting my community, and I want to do whatever I can to stop them." The collaboration between Ali and the police department proved to be incredibly effective. Within a week, they had identified not just the fake imam from the South Side incident, but an entire network of con artists who were operating similar schemes throughout Chicago and other major cities. The investigation revealed that these criminals had been specifically targeting religious communities, not just Muslims, but Christians, Jews, and other faith groups as well. They would research local religious customs and terminology just enough to appear legitimate, then exploit people's natural desire to support their faith communities. As news of the investigation spread, Ali found himself becoming an unofficial spokesperson for fraud prevention in religious communities. He began speaking at mosques, churches, and community centers, sharing his experience and teaching people how to identify and avoid these scams. During one particularly memorable presentation at a community center on Chicago's North Side, Ali addressed a diverse crowd of over 300 people. "Faith makes us want to help others," he told them. "But we have to be smart about how we help. God gave us brains, and He expects us to use them." An elderly man in the audience raised his hand. "Mr. Ali, what if we're not sure whether someone is legitimate or not?" "When in doubt, don't give cash on the spot," Ali advised. "Ask for written information about their organization. Get a phone number and an address. Real charities will be happy to provide this information. Scammers will try to pressure you to give money immediately." A middle-aged woman asked, "What about people who come to our door asking for donations?" "Same principle applies," Ali replied. "Legitimate organizations will give you time to think about it and research their cause. They won't try to pressure you into giving money right away. And never give cash to door-to-door solicitors. If you want to donate, contact the organization directly." The questions continued for over an hour, with Ali patiently addressing each concern. His natural charisma and genuine care for his community made him an effective educator, and people left the presentation feeling empowered to protect themselves and their neighbors. But Ali's efforts to combat religious fraud extended beyond just education. Working with Detective Martinez and other law enforcement officials, he helped develop a community watch program specifically designed to identify and report suspicious religious solicitation activities. The program trained volunteers to recognize the warning signs of fraudulent religious fundraising and provided them with direct contact information for police fraud units. Within 6 months of its launch, the program had led to the arrest of over a dozen con artists operating in the Chicago area. One particularly satisfying moment came when Detective Martinez called Ali with an update on the original fake imam case. "We got him," the detective announced. "His real name is Robert Thompson, and he's been running religious scams in 5 different states. Thanks to your identification and testimony, we were able to build a solid case against him." Thompson, it turned out, had been operating his fake imam persona for over 2 years, stealing thousands of dollars from Muslim communities across the Midwest. He had similar fake identities as a Christian minister and a Jewish rabbi, adapting his con to whatever religious community he was targeting. "How much money did he steal in total?" Ali asked. Conservative estimate? Over $50,000, Detective Martinez replied. And that's just what we can prove. The real number is probably much higher. Ali felt a surge of satisfaction, knowing that this predator would no longer be able to exploit people's faith for personal gain. But he also felt a deep sadness for all the victims who had been deceived before Thompson was finally caught. The case made national news, with Ali's role in exposing the fraud becoming a central part of the story. Newspapers across the country ran headlines like "Muhammad Ali KOs religious fraud" and "The champion fights crime outside the ring." The publicity brought Ali invitations to speak about fraud prevention in cities across the United States. He accepted as many as his boxing schedule would allow, traveling to communities that had been targeted by similar scams. In Detroit, he spoke to a congregation that had lost over $10,000 to a fake minister who claimed to be raising money for an orphanage in Africa. In New York, he addressed a Jewish community center where a con artist posing as a rabbi had stolen donations meant for Holocaust survivors. Each story Ali heard reinforced his commitment to fighting these crimes. These weren't just financial crimes. They were attacks on the very foundation of faith communities. They exploited people's most sacred beliefs and generous impulses, leaving victims feeling violated and betrayed. During a particularly emotional presentation in Philadelphia, an elderly woman approached Ali after his speech. "Mr. Ali," she said, tears in her eyes, "I gave that fake minister my grocery money. I had to go to my children and ask for help to buy food that week. I felt so foolish." Ali took her hands gently in his. "Sister, you are not foolish. You have a generous heart, and that's a beautiful thing. The only foolish person in this situation was the man who took advantage of your kindness." Interactions like this one motivated Ali to continue his anti-fraud work, even as his boxing career demanded more and more of his time. He began working with national religious organizations to develop educational materials that could be distributed to faith communities across the country. The materials included simple checklists for evaluating religious solicitations, contact information for reporting suspected fraud, and testimonials from fraud victims who wanted to share their experiences to help protect others. One of the most effective tools developed was a wallet-sized card that people could carry with them. The card listed key questions to ask anyone soliciting religious donations. What is the exact name and address of your organization? Can you provide written literature about your cause? Can I contact your organization directly to verify your identity? The cards were printed in multiple languages and distributed through mosques, churches, synagogues, temples, and community centers nationwide. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with religious leaders praising the practical, non-denominational approach to fraud prevention. As Ali's anti-fraud campaign gained momentum, he began to notice a shift in how these crimes were being reported and prosecuted. Law enforcement agencies were taking religious fraud more seriously, and prosecutors were seeking harsher sentences for offenders. This shift was partly due to Ali's high-profile involvement, but it also reflected a growing recognition that these crimes caused damage far beyond their immediate financial impact. They undermined trust within faith communities and made people hesitant to engage in legitimate, charitable giving. The success of Ali's efforts didn't go unnoticed by the criminal community either. Detective Martinez warned Ali that some of the con artists they had arrested were angry about his interference with their operations. "We've heard some chatter that they might try to retaliate," the detective explained during one of their regular check-ins. "Nothing specific, but I want you to be aware and take appropriate precautions." Ali appreciated the warning, but he wasn't intimidated. "Detective, I've faced down Sonny Liston and Joe Frazier in the ring. I'm not going to be scared off by a bunch of two-bit con artists. Still, Ali did take reasonable precautions, varying his daily routines and being more aware of his surroundings. He also made sure that his family and close associates were aware of the potential threat. The precautions proved unnecessary, as no retaliation ever materialized. The con artists, it seemed, preferred easier targets than a world-famous heavyweight champion with strong connections to law enforcement. As 1975 drew to a close, Ali reflected on the unexpected turn his year had taken. What had started as a chance encounter with a street-corner con artist had evolved into a nationwide campaign against religious fraud. The impact had been significant and measurable. Police departments reported increased awareness and reporting of religious fraud schemes. Religious organizations had implemented better verification procedures for charitable solicitations. And countless individuals had been educated about how to protect themselves from these predators. But perhaps most importantly, Ali had demonstrated that celebrity status could be used for more than just personal gain. His fame and influence had become tools for protecting vulnerable communities and fighting injustice outside the boxing ring. The lessons learned from that humid summer day in Chicago would stay with Ali for the rest of his life. He had seen firsthand how easily good people could be deceived by those who exploited their faith and generosity. But he had also seen how quickly a community could rally to protect itself when given the right information and leadership. As he prepared for his upcoming fights and continued his boxing career, Ali knew that his work against religious fraud would continue as well. There would always be predators looking to exploit people's faith, and there would always be a need for vigilant community members willing to stand up and say, "Enough." The fake imam incident had taught Ali that being a champion meant more than just winning fights in the ring. It meant using his platform and influence to champion the causes of justice and community protection. And in that broader arena, Muhammad Ali was determined to remain undefeated. The months following Ali's exposure of the fake imam brought unexpected developments that would test his resolve and expand his mission beyond anything he had initially imagined. It was a crisp October morning when Detective Martinez called with news that would change everything. "Ali, we've got a problem." The detective's voice carried an urgency that immediately caught the champion's attention. "That network we thought we dismantled, it's bigger than we realized, and they're adapting their methods." Ali was in his hotel room in Manila, preparing for his upcoming fight with Joe Frazier, but the detective's words commanded his full focus. "What do you mean, adapting?" "They're using your fame against you," Martinez explained. We've got reports from at least 6 cities where con artists are claiming to be collecting money for the Muhammad Ali Foundation for Religious Protection, or some variation of that name. They're using your reputation to legitimize their scams." The irony wasn't lost on Ali. His efforts to protect people from religious fraud were now being weaponized by the very criminals he was trying to stop. "How much have they stolen using my name?" "Conservative estimate, over $30,000 in the past month alone," Martinez replied. "And it's spreading fast. We've got reports from Los Angeles, Atlanta, Houston, and even some smaller cities." Ali felt a familiar fire building in his chest, the same intensity he brought to his biggest fights. "Detective, I want these people stopped, whatever it takes." "That's what I was hoping you'd say," Martinez responded. "But this is going to require a different approach. These guys are smart, organized, and they're staying one step ahead of local law enforcement by moving frequently between jurisdictions." The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Martinez outlining the scope of the problem and the challenges they faced. The criminals had learned from the mistakes of their predecessors, developing more sophisticated methods and better coordination between different cells of their operation. After hanging up, Ali sat in silence for several minutes, processing the information. His trainer, Angelo Dundee, knocked on the door and entered to find the champion staring out the window with an expression of deep concentration. "What's eating at you, champ?" Dundee asked, recognizing the look that usually preceded Ali's most determined performances. Ali explained the situation, watching as his trainer's expression shifted from confusion to anger to determination. "So what are you going to do about it?" Dundee asked. "I'm going to fight them," Ali replied simply. "But first, I'm going to beat Joe Frazier. Then I'm going to dedicate myself to stopping these criminals once and for all." The thriller in Manila took place 2 weeks later, and Ali's performance in the ring reflected the intensity of his emotions about the fraud case. He fought with a ferocity that surprised even his closest associates, channeling his anger about the criminals using his name into devastating combinations that ultimately led to Frazier's corner stopping the fight after the 14th round. In his post-fight interview, Ali made an unexpected announcement that caught the sports world off guard. "I want to talk about something more important than boxing," he said, still breathing heavily from the brutal contest. "There are criminals out there using my name to steal money from good people who think they're supporting a cause I believe in." The interviewer looked confused, clearly not prepared for this topic. "Can you elaborate on that, Muhammad?" "There is no Muhammad Ali Foundation for religious protection," Ali stated clearly, looking directly into the camera. "If anyone approaches you claiming to collect money for such an organization, they are lying. Do not give them money. Report them to the police immediately." The announcement made headlines around the world, but it also had an unintended consequence. Rather than deterring the criminals, it seemed to inspire them to become even more creative in their deceptions. Within days of Ali's televised warning, new reports emerged of con artists claiming to be collecting money for Ali's anti-fraud campaign, or the Muhammad Ali Community Protection Fund. Detective Martinez called Ali with updates that grew increasingly frustrating. "They're like a hydra," he explained during one conversation. "Every time we cut off one head, 2 more appear, and they're getting more sophisticated about avoiding law enforcement." Ali realized that traditional law enforcement methods weren't going to be sufficient to stop this network. He needed to think like a boxer, finding creative angles of attack that his opponents wouldn't expect. The solution came to him during a conversation with his business manager, Herbert Muhammad. "What if we turned their own methods against them?" Ali suggested. "What if we set up our own operation to catch them in the act?" Herbert was intrigued, but cautious. "What do you have in mind?" Ali's plan was audacious in its simplicity. He would create a legitimate foundation focused on fraud prevention and community protection, but he would also use it as bait to draw out the criminals who were exploiting his name. "We announce the real foundation publicly," Ali explained. "We make it clear that this is the only legitimate organization bearing my name. Then, we monitor for anyone trying to impersonate our representatives or create fake versions of our foundation." The plan required careful coordination with law enforcement agencies across multiple states. Detective Martinez helped Ali connect with FBI agents who specialized in interstate fraud cases, and together they developed a comprehensive strategy. The Muhammad Ali Foundation for Community Protection was officially established in January 1976, with a mission statement focused on education, fraud prevention, and support for victims of religious and charitable scams. The foundation's creation was announced at a press conference in Chicago, with Ali flanked by religious leaders from multiple faiths and law enforcement officials. "This foundation represents my commitment to protecting communities from those who would exploit their faith and generosity," Ali declared to the assembled reporters. "We will work with law enforcement, religious organizations, and community groups to identify and stop these criminals." The Foundation's first major initiative was the creation of a national hotline where people could report suspected fraud or verify the legitimacy of charitable solicitations. The hotline was staffed by trained volunteers who could quickly determine whether a particular fundraising effort was legitimate. Within the first month of operation, the hotline received over 500 calls. Many were from people seeking to verify legitimate charities, but a significant number reported encounters with suspicious solicitors. The information gathered through these calls provided law enforcement with valuable intelligence about criminal operations. One particularly valuable call came from a woman in Detroit who reported being approached by someone claiming to represent the Ali Foundation. He had official-looking documents and everything, she explained to the hotline operator. But something felt wrong about the whole interaction. The caller's detailed description of the encounter, including the specific location and time, allowed local police to set up surveillance in the area. Within 3 days, they had arrested 2 individuals who were using forged Ali Foundation credentials to solicit donations. The arrests led to a breakthrough in the investigation. Under questioning, one of the suspects revealed information about the broader network, including the names of other operatives and details about their coordination methods. "They have a whole system," Detective Martinez explained to Ali during a briefing. "They share information about successful techniques, coordinate to avoid hitting the same areas too frequently, and they have someone creating high-quality fake documents and credentials." The revelation that the criminals had access to sophisticated document forgery capabilities was particularly concerning. It meant they could potentially impersonate any legitimate charity or organization, not just those connected to Ali. Working with federal agents, Ali's foundation began developing new verification methods that would be harder for criminals to replicate. They created a secure online database where people could verify the identity of foundation representatives, complete with photos and unique identification codes. The foundation also began working with legitimate charities to help them improve their own security measures. Many religious and charitable organizations had never considered that criminals might impersonate their representatives, and they were grateful for the guidance on protecting their reputations and their donors. As the foundation's work expanded, Ali found himself traveling frequently to meet with community leaders, law enforcement officials, and fraud victims. Each trip reinforced his understanding of how widespread and damaging these crimes had become. In Houston, he met with a congregation that had lost over $15,000 to criminals claiming to represent a disaster relief organization. The fake charity had used Ali's name and image in their promotional materials, complete with fabricated quotes about the importance of helping hurricane victims. "They showed us pictures of you visiting disaster areas," the congregation's pastor explained. "They had what looked like official letterhead and everything. We thought we were helping people in need." Ali felt a deep sense of responsibility for the deception, even though he had no control over how criminals used his image. "Pastor, I want to make this right," he said. "The foundation will work with law enforcement to try to recover your money and will provide educational materials to help protect your congregation in the future." Similar scenes played out in city after city as Ali met with fraud victims and community leaders. Each encounter strengthened his resolve to continue the fight against these criminals, regardless of how long it might take. The foundation's efforts began to show measurable results by the summer of 1976. Reports of religious and charitable fraud in areas where the foundation had conducted education campaigns dropped by over 40%. Law enforcement agencies reported increased cooperation from communities and better quality information about suspected criminal activities. But the criminals were adapting too. Intelligence gathered by the foundation and law enforcement indicated that the network was shifting its focus to smaller communities where there was less awareness about fraud prevention and fewer resources for investigation. "They're going after rural areas and small towns now," Detective Martinez reported during one of his regular briefings with Ali. places where people are more trusting and less likely to have heard about these scams. This development prompted Ali to expand the foundation's outreach efforts to include smaller communities. He began scheduling visits to rural areas, often speaking at small churches, community centers, and town halls. One particularly memorable visit was to a farming community in Iowa, where a fake charity had recently stolen over $8,000 by claiming to collect money for inner-city youth programs. Ali spoke to a gathering of about 150 people in the local high school gymnasium. "I know some of you might be wondering what a boxer from the big city can tell you about protecting your community," Ali began, his voice carrying easily through the modest space. "But the truth is, these criminals don't care where you live or what you do for a living. They only care about taking advantage of your good hearts." An elderly farmer raised his hand. "Mr. Ali, how are we supposed to know who to trust? We've always helped our neighbors and supported good causes." "And you should continue to do that," Ali replied. "But you can be generous and careful at the same time. Ask questions, verify information, take time to think before you give money to strangers." The questions continued for over an hour, with Ali patiently addressing concerns about everything from door-to-door solicitors to telephone fundraising calls. By the end of the evening, the community had a clear understanding of how to protect themselves while continuing to support legitimate charitable causes. As Ali's anti-fraud campaign gained national attention, he began receiving invitations to testify before congressional committees investigating consumer protection and charitable fraud. His celebrity status ensured that his testimony would receive significant media coverage, helping to raise awareness about these crimes on a national level. During one particularly impactful appearance before the House Subcommittee on Consumer Protection, Ali presented detailed evidence about the scope and sophistication of charitable fraud networks. His testimony included specific examples of how criminals had used his name and reputation to legitimize their schemes. "Mr. Chairman," Ali addressed the committee, "these are not petty criminals operating alone. This is organized crime that specifically targets people's faith and generosity. They study religious communities, learn their customs and language, and then exploit that knowledge to steal money that people believe is going to help others." The committee members were clearly moved by Ali's presentation, and several expressed surprise at the sophistication of the criminal operations he described. The hearing resulted in new legislation that increased penalties for charitable fraud and provided additional resources for interstate investigation of these crimes. But perhaps the most significant development came when Ali received an unexpected phone call from an FBI agent named Sarah Chen, who had been tracking charitable fraud cases across the western United States. "Mr. Ali, I've been following your foundation's work, and I think we may have found the head of the snake," Agent Chen explained. "We've identified what appears to be the central coordination point for many of these fraud networks." The investigation had led to a sophisticated operation based in Las Vegas, where a group of criminals had established what appeared to be a legitimate business providing marketing and administrative services to charities. In reality, they were using this front to gather information about successful fundraising techniques, create fraudulent credentials, and coordinate criminal activities across multiple states. "They've been operating for at least 3 years, Agent Chen continued. "We estimate they've stolen over $2 million through various schemes, including the ones that have been using your name." The revelation that the network had stolen such a massive amount of money reinforced Ali's determination to see the investigation through to its conclusion. He agreed to cooperate fully with the FBI's operation, including potentially serving as bait to draw out the criminals. The plan was complex and dangerous. Ali would publicly announce a major new initiative by his foundation, creating an opportunity for the criminals to attempt their impersonation scheme on a larger scale. Federal agents would be monitoring all communications and ready to move when the criminals revealed themselves. As Ali prepared for what could be the final phase of his anti-fraud campaign, he reflected on how much his life had changed since that summer day in Chicago when he first encountered the fake imam. What had started as a simple act of community protection had evolved into a nationwide crusade against organized crime. The upcoming operation would test everything he had learned about these criminals and their methods. But Ali felt confident that his combination of celebrity influence, community support, and law enforcement cooperation would finally bring this network to justice. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine whether Ali's anti-fraud campaign would achieve its ultimate goal of dismantling the criminal organization that had been exploiting faith communities across the country. The champion was ready for his biggest fight outside the ring. The FBI operation culminated in coordinated raids across 7 states, resulting in the arrest of 23 individuals connected to the fraud network. The Las Vegas headquarters yielded evidence of over $3 million in stolen donations and detailed records of their nationwide operations. Ali stood with Agent Chen as the final arrests were made. "We did it," she said, watching the suspects being led away in handcuffs. "No," Ali replied, his voice filled with quiet satisfaction. "The communities did it. They learned to protect themselves." The network's dismantling sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld. Religious fraud cases dropped by 70% nationwide in the following year. Ali's foundation continued its educational work, but the champion knew the most important victory was the empowerment of ordinary people to defend their communities. Years later, when asked about his greatest achievement outside boxing, Ali would always mention that summer day in Chicago when he confronted a fake imam. It wasn't just about stopping one criminal. It was about proving that communities could stand together against those who would exploit their faith and generosity. The lesson resonated far beyond fraud prevention. When good people unite with knowledge and courage, they become unstoppable.